You're reading in a brightly lit room. Everything is visible. The walls, the furniture, the text on the page, clear, efficient, unambiguous. And then the power goes out. For a moment, total darkness, disorienting. You can't move safely, you fumble for your phone, turn on its flashlight, and suddenly, everything changes. The beam doesn't illuminate the whole room. It creates a circle of visibility surrounded by shadow. And something about this limited light feels different. Not worse, just different. Your attention sharpens. You notice textures you ignored before. Contours emerge. The room has depth again. This is where we begin episode 2. Because light, it turns out, does more than reveal, and shadow does more than conceal. Across history, light has been the most persistent metaphor for truth. To know something is to see it clearly. To understand is to bring it to light. Ignorance is darkness, knowledge is illumination. This metaphor feels natural, almost inevitable. But symbols that endure rarely survive by telling a single story. From the beginning of human storytelling, light and shadow appear together, not as enemies, but as partners in the act of seeing. In the earliest cave paintings, animals emerged not from blank walls, but from uneven rock surfaces shaped by flickering torchlight. Archaeologist Mark Azima has argued that Paleolithic artists may have positioned images on irregular surfaces to create the illusion of movement when viewed by torchlight. The contours of stone, the movement of flame, the interplay of brightness and darkness all contribute to the image. The animal is not fully revealed at once. It is suggested. It appears, disappears, and appears again as the flame moves and flickers. Seeing here is not total exposure. It is partial revelation. Watch what happens. The bison painted on the cave wall at Lascaux doesn't simply exist as pigment on stone. When firelight flickers across the uneven surface, the animal seems to move. Its shoulder rises with the rock's contour. Its legs shift as shadows play across the depression in the wall. The ancient artists understood something profound. The image lives in the interplay, not in the exposure. One of the most enduring philosophical images of light and shadow appears in Plato's allegory of the cave. Prisoners sit chained facing a wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows of objects they cannot see directly. These shadows become their reality. When one prisoner is freed and turns toward the fire, toward the source of light, he's blinded. This detail is often overlooked. The problem in the cave is not simply darkness. It is sudden illumination. The prisoner stands at a threshold between darkness and light, between ignorance and knowledge. The threshold itself is where transformation becomes possible. But transformation requires time. The eyes need to adjust. Vision requires accommodation. Philosopher Hans Blumenberg, writing on the historical development of myth, argued that Plato's cave captures what he called the terror of light, the violence of sudden illumination as an instrument of destabilization rather than orientation. While Blumenberg's concern was with why humans develop myth as a buffer against overwhelming reality, the principle translates directly. Truth introduced too abruptly cannot be integrated. It overwhelms before it can orient. Plato understood this. The freed prisoner must move gradually, first toward the fire, then toward the cave entrance, finally into sunlight, but only after long preparation. Rush the process and the light itself becomes blinding, paralyzing. Between darkness and full light, there is shadow. And shadow is where movement becomes possible. This is not unique to Western philosophy. In Eastern traditions, the balance is even more explicit. In Taoist thought, light and dark, yang and yin, are not opposites to be conquered, but complementary forces. Too much of either leads to imbalance. Harmony lies in their dynamic interplay. Night itself is rarely portrayed as pure negation. Stars are visible only because of darkness. Dreams arrive only when sight recedes. Insight, in many traditions, comes not from staring harder, but from closing the eyes. This recognition runs through myth everywhere. Heroes rarely begin their journeys at noon, under a clear sky. They enter forests at dusk. They descend into caves. They travel at twilight. That unstable hour when forms blur and certainty weakens. These are not accidents of storytelling. They reflect an ancient recognition. Orientation depends on contrast. Psychologist James J. Gibson established that depth perception, our ability to orient in space, depends entirely on gradients of light and texture. Remove contrast through uniform illumination and the environment becomes what he termed ungraspable. We literally cannot find our footing. Total darkness disorients. Total light overwhelms. Shadow preserves distinction. You've experienced this yourself. Think of the last time you walked into a dark theater from bright sunlight. For the first few moments, you're blind, not because there's no light, the screen is glowing, but because your eyes haven't adjusted. You can't find your seat. You can't orient yourself. Then gradually, shapes emerge. The rows of seats, the aisle, other faces, you can move again. This is what shadow does. It gives vision time to find its footing. The danger of darkness is obvious. When nothing is visible, orientation collapses. Fear fills the void. The imagination runs unchecked. But the danger of light is subtler. When everything is revealed at once, attention has nowhere to rest. There's no depth to explore, no mystery to approach. Saturation replaces curiosity. In mythic warnings, this danger appears repeatedly. The gaze of Medusa turns living beings to stone. To see everything instantly and completely is not liberating, it is paralyzing. In some traditions, gods hide their full forms from mortals because an unmediated vision would destroy them. Moses cannot look directly at the face of God. The divine must be veiled, filtered, mediated, approached through shadow. Shadow is not the enemy of truth. It is the condition that makes truth bearable. This is why symbols that endure rarely present themselves fully formed. They invite approach. They resist immediate resolution. They withhold just enough to sustain engagement. The rabbit hole, too, is not brightly lit. It descends into shadow, and yet it is not pitch black. There are glimpses, contours, moments of orientation, enough to see where you're going, not enough to see where you'll end up. Remember the cat from episode 1? It approached the threshold, paused, withdrew, returned. Why did it pause? Not because it couldn't see, because it couldn't see everything. If the threshold were fully illuminated, every corner visible, every risk calculable, the cat would either proceed immediately or retreat immediately. Decision would be instant. But the threshold is shadowed. Something is visible, something is not. And in that partial visibility, the cat can linger. It can test. It can return. Shadow creates the conditions for this rhythm. Total light collapses it into immediate decision. Total darkness prevents approach entirely. This is what we mean when we say shadow holds attention. Not that it traps attention, not that it manipulates attention, but that it creates an environment where attention can pace itself. Think of a doorway, not a wall, as walls block vision, not open air, that offers no structure. A doorway. You can cross, you can wait, you can look through without entering. Nothing is forced. This is what light and shadow create together. A doorway for attention. A place where movement is possible but not required. Where return is invited but not demanded. The threshold is forgiving. At this stage, nothing irreversible has occurred. You can look away, you can disengage, you can return later or not at all. This matters because attention that is coerced does not deepen, it resists. When attention is pulled too hard by urgency, outrage, or total exposure, it either snaps or shuts down. It does not return. Shadow functions as a protective constraint. It limits exposure so that engagement can persist. Watch what happens when you see a photograph slowly develop in a dark room. The image doesn't appear all at once. First, vague shapes, then contours, then details. The gradual emergence holds your attention in ways instant revelation cannot. This is shadow doing its work, not hiding the image, revealing it at a pace attention can follow. The same principle appears in how children engage with stories. A child asks to hear the same story again and again, not because they don't understand it, but because it continues to yield something new. Psychologist Jessica Horst's research shows that toddlers learn new words better from repeated exposure to the same book than from varied books containing the same words. While her research concerns early language acquisition specifically, the underlying dynamic generalizes. Familiarity doesn't breed boredom, it creates a space for discovery. The story is not fully illuminated. It contains shadowed corners. Each return reveals something previously missed. Meaning persists when something remains partially withheld. This is where modern assumptions quietly break down. We often assume that if something matters, it should be made maximally clear immediately. If an idea is important, we should explain it thoroughly. If a problem is urgent, we should illuminate every angle. But this instinct confuses clarity with orientation. Orientation is not achieved by total visibility. It is achieved by navigable visibility. Too little light and you cannot move. Too much light and you cannot rest your gaze. It's worth noting that cognitive complexity alone can sustain attention without perceptual shadow. A mathematical proof, a Bach fugue, a chess problem can reward return indefinitely while hiding nothing. But symbolic meaning operates differently. Symbols work through approach and return, through the accumulation of partial encounters. They are not resolved by analysis. They are inhabited through repeated contact. Shadow is not just attention management. It is the specific condition under which engagement is possible at all. Shadow creates the conditions under which attention can pace itself. Human vision itself depends on contrast. Depth is created by the play of light and shadow. Remove shadow entirely, and the world becomes flat, blinding, indistinguishable. The same is true cognitively. When an idea is fully explained, fully categorized, fully resolved the first time it appears, attention has nowhere to go. It cannot deepen, it cannot return. This is why religious and mythic traditions so often stage revelation gradually. Oracles speak in riddles, prophecies arrive obliquely. Sacred texts are layered, allegorical, recursive. Even in traditions that value revelation, revelation is mediated. It unfolds, it is veiled, not because humans cannot handle truth, but because attention cannot survive saturation. When everything is made fully explicit at once, nothing invites return. Psychologists Celeste Kidd and Benjamin Hayden, writing on the neuroscience of curiosity, identify a core tension. Attention is drawn towards novel stimuli, but sustained only by stimuli that remain partially unpredictable. Complete revelation eliminates both novelty and depth. This is the subtle danger of over-illumination. Not that it deceives, but that it exhausts. In such conditions, attention fragments. Curiosity becomes restless. Instead of returning to deepen, it jumps to the next stimulus. The world becomes bright, but thin. Shadow thickens experience. It allows meaning to accumulate slowly across time through repeated contact. Consider the difference between two environments. In one, every piece of information is presented completely, optimized for instant comprehension, designed for immediate consumption and rapid replacement. Attention is pulled forward relentlessly, never allowed to circle back. Novelty becomes mandatory. In another, information is presented with gaps, with questions left open, with invitations to return. Attention is allowed to move at its own pace, to revisit, to discover something new in what was already seen. The first environment is a stream. It only moves forward. The second environment has thresholds. It marks places worth crossing again. This is the difference between wandering and orientation. Wandering is movement without reference points. Orientation requires landmarks. Light and shadow together create landmarks. They shape where attention pauses, where it turns back, where it begins to recognize something is stable enough to hold. This recognition matters because attention does not commit all at once. It tests, it samples, it returns. Shadow preserves that rhythm. When shadow is removed, when everything is revealed instantly, attention becomes shallow. Engagement becomes fleeting. We move on, not because we are disinterested, but because there is nothing left to do with what we've seen. Shadow is not confusion. It is not deception. It is attentional ecology, an environment that honors how attention actually works rather than how we think it should work. In environments that preserve shadow, attention is allowed to mature. It is not rushed. It is not forced into judgment. It can dwell without being consumed. In environments that eliminate shadow, where everything is exposed, categorized, and optimized for immediate comprehension, attention becomes brittle. It snaps rather than bends. This distinction will matter later in the season. For now, it is enough to recognize that attention does not survive on clarity alone. It needs restraint. It needs pacing. It needs the promise that something remains. Shadow is that promise. Light reveals, shadow preserves. But neither matters unless attention returns. Return is the quiet hinge of this episode. Not arrival, not resolution, simply return. The act of coming back to the same object, question, or image without being compelled, without being finished with it, without exhausting it. Attention does not persist because something is clear. It persists because something remains unfinished. But unfinished does not mean chaotic. There's a difference between mystery and confusion, between opacity and obscurity. Shadow, when it functions well, does not scatter attention. It holds it. Think of a painting in a museum. You walk past it once, glance at it, continue. Later, you pass it again. This time, you stop. Something about it catches you. You return a third time, a fourth. Each time, you notice something you missed before. A detail in the background, the way the light falls on a face, the texture of brushstrokes. You're not confused. You simply haven't exhausted the image. It continues to offer something. This is return, not obligation, not compulsion, just the recognition that there is more to see. Return creates continuity, and continuity is something different from attention alone. Continuity emerges when attention does not merely revisit, but begins to recognize. Recognition is subtle. It is the feeling of, I've been here before. Not mastery, not understanding, just a sense of persistence across time. Philosopher Gaston Bachelard called this resonance, the way certain images or experiences echo within us across repeated encounters. Unlike immediate comprehension, resonance builds slowly, each return amplifying what came before. This is the moment when attention stops being episodic. It starts becoming patterned. But that pattern cannot form unless the environment allows return. Too much clarity closes the loop too quickly. Too much darkness prevents the loop from forming at all. Shadow keeps the loop open. This is why initiation rituals across cultures are staged, gradual, and symbolic rather than explanatory. They introduce participants to new meanings without fully articulating them. Anthropologist Victor Turner showed that rituals function through what he called liminality, sustained states of ambiguity where participants exist between social roles. This threshold state is not uncomfortable transition to be rushed through, but generative space where transformation becomes possible through repeated return. Meaning accumulates not through force, but through familiarity, and familiarity requires return. So, attention returns. It circles back. It revisits the threshold between light and shadow, finding new contours each time. And with each return, something begins to change. The thing you're attending to starts to feel different. Not fully understood, not mastered, just present in a way that persists even when you're not looking at it. This is where episode 2 ends. Not at arrival, not at understanding, at return. The cat stood at the threshold and came back. Light and shadow created the conditions for that return. Return is not a failure to proceed. It is the evidence that something is worth proceeding toward. Attention must return before it can persist, and the condition that makes return possible is what we've been exploring all episode. Shadow, the partial, the not yet resolved. In the next episode, we will look at objects, not objects as tools or commodities, but as anchors. Things attention returns to again and again, accumulating weight over time. Because when attention keeps returning, the thing attended to changes. It becomes more than itself. Next episode, the object, why some things become impossible to forget.